Welcome to the Coven Chat.
Thank you for joining me here at the Maiden Circle Coven Chat podcast, where we talk all things witchy, spiritual, and human.
Hello, merry meet, and welcome. Welcome back to the Coven Chat. Happy New Year. Did you have a nice one? I hope you did. And I hope every day from here on out is better than the last. In today's episode, we are discussing shadow work. You may have heard the term shadow work, especially in the last few years. It has gained a lot of popularity. It's actually been around for quite some time. I don't often see anyone really discussing what it is, how we do it, or even where it comes from. Just do your shadow work. So I wanted to explore this idea, this concept in today's episode. But of course, I'd like to start with the reading of a poem. So this is actually a poem I wrote, and I thought it would be appropriate because it speaks to an aspect of my shadow. I speak a lot about my own issues and experiences because ultimately, that's all I really know. That's all anyone really knows. But I would like to reapproach this subject in the future with an interview. So if you're listening to this episode and you'd like to discuss shadow work from your own perspective, I'd love to have you in the future. So fair warning for language. This poem is called Hereditary Trauma. I think I am a genetic fuck-up, or at least I used to. I don't mean that my genes are fucked up or that I'm going to inherit diseases, although that may be true too, but I think that I'm predisposed to making bad decisions. My mother made bad decisions, from drug addiction to alcoholism to having crack babies, myself included, and 4 tragic marriages. And she followed her mother's footsteps, my grandmother, whose family for generations told women they aren't enough. My mother, my sisters are not enough. I am not enough. And through our bloodline, this message passed woman to woman, breaking us down before we even had a foundation. Then one day, my mother, my goddess, she opened her eyes, maybe later than ideal, but soon enough for change, soon enough to make me different. So, along with drinking and drugging, I started reading and thinking, making plans for a future I had no right to imagine. I took a path my blood had not traveled, at least not entirely. Saw success when I had no reason to expect it, and every time I looked into failure's eyes and waited. It called out to me, sopping in tears of past years, holding grayed-out memories to keep me close. How could I leave it behind? It's my past. It's the suitcase I carry that makes every first date feel like an interview. It's the difference between happy and okay for now. It's the vision of every wall around me crumbling to dust. It's the face of my inheritance. I found failure lurking in my inner sanctum before I knew that I had one. And I'm sure I'll find it again. Today I shine a light on the shadows cast by the memory of my flesh. My blood runs hot. It burns through my existence and propels me forward. And it whispers in the gentle burbling of a hidden creek. My blood calls me to right the wrongs it suffered. It calls me to cleanse the darkness. I don't know why, but I sure hope it's genetic. I hope you liked that. Let's move on to our fun fact of the day.
Pagan fun fact. Here's your fun facts now.
As soon as I decided on today's episode, I thought, what better fun fact than a story that focuses on shadows? That is, of course, what's better than one of my favorite philosophical teachings, the allegory of the cave. I first learned about the allegory of the cave sometime in either high school or college. And when I first heard the allegory of the cave, it really struck a nerve, and I've never forgotten it. The allegory of the cave first appears in Plato's writings, where he describes his teacher Socrates speaking to his older brother Glaucon. In his teaching, Socrates asks Glaucon to imagine a group of people in a cave. The cave has an opening where light comes in, but the people are facing the back wall of the cave. They are chained, their hands and necks are chained so that they can only ever look in that one direction. Behind them is a large fire, and between the fire and the people is a wall. There are other people behind the wall using puppets to create shadows where the chained people can see the shadows. The people holding the puppets or shapes might make noises, they might name the shapes. You may see the shape of a horse and they say horse. You may see the shape, or you being the chained person, may see a shape of a book and they'll say this is a book. Or they might just be silent and have the images moving around. All the while, the chained people can only see the shadows on the wall. Because of that, both Socrates and Glaucon agree that the chained people would attribute all the noises they're hearing, all of the sounds, to the shadows. So they would hear the horse neigh, and the shadow itself is what they would call the horse. They would hear or assume the neighing comes from the horse. But the thing is, they're not experiencing a horse. They've never seen a horse. They've only seen and experienced a shadow, an illusion. The story continues with one of the chained people becoming unshackled. They are released and they're able to turn around. They're able to see the wall. They're able to see the puppets or the shapes. They're able to see the fire and the puppeteers. The formerly chained person's eyes may take some time to adjust to the light. Socrates notes that this is a painful transition, but ultimately they have a better understanding of the shadows that they've known their whole lives. They are further educated by being pushed out of the cave and into the world, where once again their eyes will need to adjust to a new light. The unchained one may take some time to explore new levels of knowledge, perhaps only seeing reflections at first and then finally seeing things in their full form, finally seeing the source of all the light and life, the sun. Then Socrates goes on and discusses the person returning to the cave, returning to the shadows. But now their vision has changed. Now the shadows are less clear and defined because they have witnessed a solid, defined, clear world. So now when the shadow of a book comes up and the other chained people say, that's a book, or the shadow of a horse comes up and they say, what is that? The unchained person is no longer able to visualize it. They may not be as good at guessing what shadows are what. Those who are chained may pity the unchained. They may say, being out there hasn't done you any good. It's ruined your eyes. Now you don't know as much as you used to. If the unchained one tried to tell those who were chained what they saw, the chained ones would just call them crazy. They would more than likely reject the unchained's new information and assume that they know less now than they did before. Socrates goes as far as to suggest that the chained may try to kill the unchained for attempting to force them into the painful, bright light of the sun, for attempting to force them away from what they've always known. There are, of course, many different thought processes you can take from this story. There are many different questions we can ask about humanity, about our education, about our acceptance or otherwise of new knowledge. And I'd love to have a discussion with any of you out there about this allegory. Feel free to write in to me or message me on one of my various social medias. For now, I simply leave you with that story, with the thought of that story, to ask your own questions, to explore in your own time. And that was our pagan fun fact of the day. More of a story than a fact. I suppose the fact is that the story was told, and Plato gave it to us. And another fun fact is that this story is still very relevant in today's society. I'll let you figure out how. Let's move on to our musing of the day. Shadow work stems from the concept of the shadow. According to Carl Jung, a philosopher, the shadow is the hidden aspect of the human psyche. Carl Jung separated the human psyche into essentially two parts, the persona and the animus. The persona is what we see. It's what we think of ourselves and what we want others to think of us. Whereas the anima or animus is the inner side of us. It's the part that we try to keep hidden. It's our subconscious. It's our shadow and it's our ego. It's these parts of us that we cannot control, but we can understand. So shadow work grew from that concept into what is now essentially looked at as a spiritual practice. It is ultimately a psychological exercise, and some might argue that it is one of the most important psychological exercises. Shadow work allows us to access all of our issues. We begin to understand them better, which means we understand ourselves better, which means we understand how to navigate the world around us better. We also begin to understand other people better, because as Jung puts it, there is a personal individual shadow, but there is also a collective shadow. There are many collective shadows, depending on culture and region. And then, of course, all of our cultures, all of our differences give way to a ton of similarities, so that all of society, all of humanity has a collective shadow that we all share. And so doing this work can be beneficial for everyone, especially the more people who do it. The more we address our collective shadow, the better we are going to move forward as a collective, as a society. Back on a personal level, on an individual level, shadow work can help us heal generational trauma. Now you might understand why I read that poem. Shadow work allows us to feel more whole, more connected with what's inside of us. We feel that the person that we see ourselves as and that we show ourselves as to the world is more in line with who we truly are. And that can be very difficult for a lot of people, because a lot of people exist only through the persona. They only interact with the persona, and they don't necessarily question the persona until they're forced to. Many people spend decades of their lives on a path that is essentially just going through the motions. They're doing what they're told, doing what's expected, until somewhere down the line, they either snap, or they surprise themselves with some new interest or kink, or they're simply constantly uncomfortable until they die. I know someone who has a habit of saying that they're going through the motions. Every time I hear it, it makes me a bit sad, because no one should just be going through the motions of existence. We all have a purpose. Shadow work allows us to connect with that purpose, to see what our true purpose is. And our true purpose has a lot to do with our passions. And if you're passionate, you cannot possibly just be going through the motions. You're not in that robotic state. You're not in that emotionless state. When I think of that phrase, because I am so influenced by fiction and storytelling, I remember Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the episode Once More with Feeling, their musical episode. It's very popular If you know Buffy, you probably know that episode. And there is a song literally called Going Through the Motions. And it's all about Buffy feeling cold, empty, disconnected. She no longer has passion for her calling. She no longer feels the calling. She's just doing it because she's supposed to be doing it. It's her job, it's who she is, but she doesn't feel any connection with it anymore. She doesn't feel any connection with herself, with the world around her, with her friends. She is in a depression. She is in a very sad state. At this time in her journey, she hasn't yet addressed her shadow. She hasn't addressed the darkness inside of her that is leading her to feel this disconnect. She hasn't yet addressed the fact that she feels like she was ripped out of heaven, that she feels like she had paradise. She saw the light and was forced back into the dark cave, forced back into seeing only illusions after she'd experienced something illuminating. Referring back to the allegory, Socrates expressed, if you were to meet a person who came from the darkness into the light, you would be thrilled for them, for they are now enlightened. But if you were to meet someone who came from the light and was forced back into the darkness, you would pity them. Your heart would break for them. Assuming, of course, you still lived in the light. You still saw the light. And that's the feeling I get from Buffy in those times where she saw the light and was brought back to darkness, only to feel that she no longer had a purpose in it. And because she wasn't yet aware that that was why she felt she had no purpose, because she had seen so much light, at least she hadn't yet admitted it. She hadn't yet spoken it. She felt disconnected. She felt lost. And that's what happens to a lot of us when we haven't yet addressed our shadow, when we haven't yet dug deep inside of us to figure out our own light, to see our own illumination, and then see beyond that, to see the light of the collective shadow. Much of society, as it stands right now, functions on suppressing the shadow, on hiding or ignoring the shadow. We drank, we immerse ourselves in fiction. When I was a kid, I was so deeply enthralled in fiction. I did not see anything going on around me. I was either in a book or watching TV, hence why I reference it all the time. There could be fighting going on around me. There could be a bunch of drunk adults arguing, breaking things, being way too sexual to be around children, with each other, with adults, but still displaying extreme sexual behavior in front of children. I could have been surrounded or I could have been alone. It didn't matter because I was locked away in fiction, locked away in a story. And it went on like that for many, many years. It wasn't until I was probably in my 20s that I really started digging deep into my own shadow, which is kind of crazy because I've been on this spiritual journey since I was around 12 or 13. That started my shadow journey, but I didn't truly dig and truly honestly look at the things that had affected me on a psychological level until I was an adult, and until I was far away from the environments that had continued to affect me in those ways. The thing about Carl Jung's shadow, he didn't believe it was only these dark things. It was only our demons, our repressed sorrows, our fears, our traumas from so many different things. It was also our hidden joys. It was also the things that we love but didn't want to love or were told we weren't supposed to love. It could be anything from liking the color yellow and having all your friends around you tell you that yellow is a girly color, or yellow is a stupid color, or yellow looks like pee. Why would you like the color of pee? And so you suppress your love for the color of yellow. It could be something as small as that becomes a shadow. That now when you see a yellow house and everyone around you is going, ew, that's hideous, and you go, yeah, who would live in that? But inside, there's this spark in you that says, actually, I could work with this. This is actually such a happy color for me. But you don't address that until you address your shadow. It could be something like you're a very masculine person, but you love stuffed animals. You love fluffy toys. You love cute things. And nowadays in 2023, that's totally acceptable for most people. It's not something that most people are going to look twice at. a big, strong, burly, masculine person loving something cute and tiny. It's one of our favorite tropes. But for decades, for generations, masculine, big, strong people were told that that was not something they were allowed to like. It had to be hidden. It had to become shadow. So these big masculine people, to compensate for their shadow, for liking these cute girly things, become more masculine, become more aggressive, become tougher and harder and sadder and angrier, because they're not dealing with the thing inside of them, with the shadow of love or the shadow of cuteness. So shadow work isn't just opening up wounds and trying to dig out the root. It's also opening up treasure chests to get to the truest, most aligned, most honest version of ourselves. And again, the more we do that, the more people who take on that task, the better overall society is going to be. It sounds obvious, but a lot of people's actions don't really show that they understand that. People who haven't addressed their shadow may talk negatively about themselves. They may feel extreme anxiety about everything. They deal with depression and excess stress. They struggle to interact with other people. And when they do interact with other people, the voice inside their head tells them that they are doing something wrong. And when I say they, I also include myself. I've dealt with these things for many, many years. My depression almost killed me a couple of times. The thing with shadow work is that it is ongoing. It is a lifelong practice because there will always be new things that inspire new shadows within us, from our interactions with other people, from our attempts to create things. If you've ever painted a picture or written a story or tried to do a podcast, there may be a new shadow born that says there are too many people already doing this, or there's no way you can be successful in this, or no one wants to listen to you ramble. And we deal with them. And if we deal with them, we find that our shadows, 9 times out of 10, are illusions. They don't have to be true. These things that we tell ourselves, they don't have to be real. And I say that all the time to myself when my inner dialogue becomes sort of a jerk, sort of a bitch. I have to say that doesn't have to be a true thought. That doesn't have to be real. Sometimes I have to do more than that. Sometimes I have to stop and look around and say, this is what's real. I use my 5 senses to get grounded. I say, this is what I can touch, taste, smell, see, and hear. This is what's real. This is what I have experienced. This is what I have accomplished. This is what's real. That thought in my head saying you can't do this doesn't align with the fact that I've done this, or I've done something harder, or I've done something similar already. And if I've done that, then I can do this, whatever this is. Chances are, whatever you're working on right now, this isn't the first thing you've put your mind to. It won't be the last. And it isn't the only thing you've ever attempted, and I'm sure that you've attempted things that you have accomplished. It could be something as small as taking a walk when you didn't feel like you had the energy. It could be making your first successful omelet when all you've had before was a mess of accidentally scrambled eggs. It could be learning to snap your fingers in your 20s, like I did. Something I thought I would never be able to do, that I spent years not thinking I could do, that my sister used to make fun of me. She'd come around and she'd snap and she'd be like, haha, you can't do this. I didn't think I would ever do it, and then one day, it just happened. I snapped my fingers. That sounds so silly and small, but it was a lifetime, over 2 decades, of not being able to do a thing and not believing I could do a thing, to one day saying, you know what, maybe I can, and then I did. I practiced and I practiced, trying to get my fingers in the exact right position, and then I did. And now I do it automatically. Sometimes I'll remember something, and to help me remember, I'll snap. And it's not something that I'm doing consciously, it's just something that now my body does. And part of that was because I stopped telling myself that I couldn't. I stopped believing the story, the shadow that said that I couldn't. And that's a very small example, but that's the thing. The shadow doesn't care about the size. It doesn't care about whether it's a huge trauma or a small comment someone made. The more we deal with it, the more joyful and aligned we become. The more proud of ourselves we become. And the more we have to look back on when those shadows come up again to say, that's illusion, because this is what the truth is. This is what the reality has been or can be. I am, of course, and obviously no expert on this subject, but I am experienced with shadow work. And I can say that I feel so much more myself, so much more authentic, so much more in alignment with who I am, with what I believe, and with what I want to do with my time, with my life, with my soul, with my love, than ever before in my life. I know that any time I hear someone say, if you could go back in time and change something in your own life, what would it be? My first instinct is to say I would not do that, because every step of the way brought me right here, and right here, there's just so much I cannot and will not give up. So much of myself that I love, that I am thrilled to experience and be, that I could not go and change anything because those things could change now. And I love me right now. And I love you. I love the world. I love my pets. I love being. I love existing. And that was hard won. That was not something that I was experiencing growing up. That is not something that I was, but it is now who I am, and I cannot change, would not change who I am. There will always be shadows to address. No one is perfect. I am not happy all the time. Well, I'm not light and joyful and bright all the time, but I do have access to happiness at all times. Nothing is perfect. I'm not going to sit here and say that my life is the ideal life or that it's perfect in any way. There are many things to still address and work towards and heal. There's still a lot of growth that I need to do. But where I am now, I'm so grateful for. And I can attribute that to shadow work. And as always, I can attribute my doing shadow work to my practice, to my religion, to my beliefs, to my faith. Because when the shadows get too dark, I always have that to remind me. My faith is the sun. If you would like to look more into shadow work, there are going to be some links of different things that I didn't actually directly mention or reference to in the show description. I did get quite a lot of my shadow work talking points from the Society of Analytical Psychology, so of course that will be linked, but I'll also add a few different links that I didn't mention, just so you can look a little bit further into the subject itself, because it's a big, broad topic, and there's no way I can get to it all on my own here. And again, if you would like to come here and talk to me about your experience with shadow work, I welcome you to do so. I would love to do another episode on this topic. But that's going to be it for me today. I do hope you got something of value out of this episode. So that's it. Let's move on to our card reading of the day. So today we'll start our reading with the Soul Healing Oracle, and then we will use the tarot to clarify. We have number 31, patience, waiting, stillness, pause. We have number 37, the boy, masculine energy, youthful, brashness. We have shed your skin, number 45, releasing old habits, be true to yourself, no more masks. We have number 28, the joy in your soul, immense happiness, inner warmth, sunshine. And finally we have number 19, the soul needs air, breathe, flow, release. On the bottom of the deck, we have number 1, soul healing, soul growth, self-care, healing energy. I'm going to pull some tarot cards to clarify. We have the 9 of Wands. We have the 3 of Pentacles. And surprisingly, that's it. On the bottom of the deck, we have Justice. The first thing I actually noticed here is the Soul Healing and Justice card. Justice is number 11, Soul Healing is number 1, so we have a 1-11. We have a new beginning. There is the energy of the transition. We've moved from being patient to now it's time to burst into action, especially going from patience to the boy. We're going from this stillness, this slowness, into brashness, into lightness with youthful and masculine energy. It's active, it's moving forward, it's bursting into action. And the action we're taking is all about that alignment that we were talking about in this episode. If you do shadow work, you're more aligned with yourself. This is releasing old habits. This is letting go of things that no longer serve you. This is being true to who you are and being honest about who you are, being open with who you are. You've possibly been in a cocoon for a bit and sort of maybe just waiting. Maybe you felt a sense of stagnancy or pause, and suddenly something has happened that has brought you into this place of saying no more. No more stagnancy, no more pretending, no more going through the motions, no more doing things just to be doing them. And when you do that, when you shed this skin, you move into the joy in your soul. You move into this inner knowing that you're going to be okay, this freedom with breathe, flow, release. You get into that flow state. You get into that state of knowing that you're on the right path. In fact, the image here is a series of spirals, and they almost could look like paths, like the yellow brick road in Wizard of Oz, that kind of a path. It's this spiral path that you're taking towards freedom, towards joy. And there will be some effort here. There will be some work. With the Nine of Wands, I'm just getting, you went through some heavy stuff. This last year maybe even was a very difficult time for you. Or you're just sort of digging into the things that are heavy. You're doing the work to bring about this truth. These two cards fall kind of under Patience and the Boy, just where I laid them down. And that's kind of telling me this is the phase that you've been in. This Nine of Wands, heavy, hardworking, nose to the grindstone kind of energy. And you've been patient. You've been trusting the process. And because you've trusted the process, because you've trusted yourself, you're now once again able to shed the mask, shed your skin, shed the things that were weighing you down. Your soul is healing with this 111. This new beginning for you is balance. Justice is balanced. She's got these scales, and she's also shining a light on a sun, and that sun is reflecting. The crazy thing is, though, she's blindfolded, so she can't see. So maybe you weren't able to really see the progress that you've made until something happens, and all of a sudden you're like able to do things you weren't able to do before. You didn't see yourself building muscle and you didn't realize that you were, getting stronger until you had to lift the car up off of some kid. And that's obviously an extreme example, but you didn't realize that all the bricks you've been laying were actually building you a castle. Because all you could see were the bricks. All you could see was this step and this step and this step. And I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And then something this week is showing you, look what you've done. Look what you've let go of. Look what you've built. Look what you've become. And this is you. This is the truth of you. I was tempted to pull some cards to clarify, but I actually don't think we need to. You have gone through some sort of storm, and you've been patient, knowing that you'll get out. You've been digging your way out, and you may have been a little bit too focused on the work. And I think this week you're going to see the fruit. You're going to see the like what I said, the castle that you built. You're going to see the truth of who you are and what you've done, and you're going to find a lot of joy in that. You're going to find a lot of freedom in that. You're going to be able to let go of of whatever it is that's been holding you down, because we have releasing old habits, and then we have release in the soul needs air. So you are going to be releasing something that simply has not served you, and this is going to leave you in a state of joy, a state of lightness. And I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy for any of us this may resonate for. Thank you so much for joining me this week. Thank you for being a part of everything that Maiden Circle is. I appreciate you. I hope that this new year, 2023, serves you very, very well. I hope it does us all well, that we could all come into alignment with this lightness and this healing that has been hinting at its arrival for quite some time. The age of Aquarius is what they used to call it, but this change that's been coming for quite some time, and I am seeing it happening at a global scale, and I hope that this year it continues and that this healing increases. So until next time, thank you again. Please write in, let me know what you thought of this episode, and I will catch you in the next one. Until then, I send you with so much love and all the blessings in the world. Bye now.